The restaurant buzzed softly with the kind of calm that only comes at the end of a long day. The glow of warm lights reflected off polished glasses, and quiet laughter drifted between tables. At the far end, a man in a crisp suit sat alone, his shoulders tense as he flipped through documents. He was the CEO of a growing company, someone others might envy, but in that moment, he looked more weary than powerful. His fork pushed food around his plate as his eyes stayed locked on the papers in front of him. Just a few feet away, at a smaller table, a different picture unfolded. A single dad sat across from his young daughter, her bright eyes lighting up the room far more than the chandelier above them. They shared a simple meal, nothing extravagant, just enough, but every bite was filled with love. The father's tired face softened whenever she laughed, and he listened intently to her stories, giving her all the attention he had. They didn't look like they belonged in such an expensive place, but the daughter's joy made it feel like home. Around them, conversations flowed, waiters moved gracefully, and for a brief moment, it felt like the world had paused. Two very different lives, one marked by pressure and power, the other by quiet resilience, sat just tables apart, unaware that fate was about to connect them in a way neither could imagine. It was the calm before the storm, and no one in that restaurant had any idea what was about to unfold. The peaceful hum of the restaurant shattered in an instant. The front doors burst open, and three men stormed inside, their footsteps heavy, their eyes locked on the corner table where the CEO sat. Conversations died mid-sentence, and forks clattered against plates as unease spread through the room. The men wasted no time, marching straight toward him, their voices sharp and aggressive. Chairs scraped against the floor as diners instinctively pulled back, wanting no part of the unfolding chaos. One of the men slammed his hands onto the CEO's table, rattling the glasses. The papers scattered across the floor as another grabbed the CEO by the collar, shoving him hard against the wall. "You think you can ignore us?" one of them barked, his words echoing across the restaurant. The CEO's face went pale, his composure crumbling as fear replaced the power he usually carried. Around him, people froze, some covered their mouths in shock, others pulled out their phones but hesitated to act. A waiter tried to step forward, but the glare from one of the attackers sent him retreating. The sound of a plate crashing to the ground cut through the silence as panic began to ripple through the diners. The CEO struggled, but he was no match for the men who surrounded him. Every second stretched unbearably long, the air thick with fear. No one moved, no one spoke. It seemed the entire room had surrendered to helplessness, watching the scene spiral into danger, unaware that an unlikely hero was about to rise. The room felt frozen in fear, but at one small table, a young girl's wide eyes darted between the chaos and her father. She clutched his sleeve, whispering, "Daddy," her voice trembled, and in that instant, the single dad knew he couldn't just sit back like everyone else. Gently, he leaned down, brushing her hair from her face. "Stay under the table, sweetheart. Don't move until I come back." His words were calm, steady, though his heart pounded in his chest. She obeyed, sliding beneath the table, clutching her knees tight, her trust in him absolute. He stood up slowly, every eye in the restaurant following him. He wasn't dressed in a suit, he wasn't wealthy, and he certainly didn't look like someone who could stop three dangerous men. But there was something in his posture, firm, unshaken, that cut through the fear choking the room. He stepped closer, his voice strong but even. "That's enough," he said, directing his gaze at the men. They sneered, ready to laugh him off, but something in his tone made them hesitate. When one lunged at him, the dad moved with surprising swiftness. He caught the man's arm, twisting it just enough to disarm, not to harm. The others tried to strike, but he countered with practiced precision, using only as much force as needed to subdue them. Within moments, the restaurant that had been filled with fear now stood in stunned silence. This wasn't reckless bravado, it was controlled courage. And the father, once invisible among strangers, had just become the protector everyone was too afraid to be. The attackers fled, stumbling out into the night, leaving the restaurant in stunned quiet. Glasses lay tipped over, silverware scattered, but the silence wasn't from the mess, it was from the awe that had swept over the room. The single dad stood tall, his breath steady, though his hands trembled slightly as the weight of what just happened settled in. From beneath the table, his daughter peeked out, her little eyes shining with both fear and pride. He knelt down, scooping her into his arms, whispering, "It's okay now. Daddy's here." The CEO, still shaken, straightened his suit and walked toward the man who had just saved him. His voice cracked with disbelief. Why would you risk yourself for me? You don't even know me." He looked around at the other diners, who had stayed frozen in place, too afraid to act. Then his gaze returned to the father, searching for an answer that made sense. The dad shifted his daughter on his hip and looked the CEO in the eye. His words were simple, but they cut deeper than anything else that night. "Because my daughter is watching. And I want her to know that doing the right thing matters, even when it's hard." The room grew heavy with emotion. Some guests lowered their heads in shame, others wiped tears from their eyes. The CEO swallowed hard, realizing this stranger had given him more than protection. He had given him a lesson in courage, in integrity, in humanity itself. A few days later, the world outside the restaurant had moved on, but for the CEO, the memory of that night clung to him. He couldn't shake the image of the single dad standing between him and danger, not with pride or arrogance, but with quiet strength. He had been saved not by security guards or friends in high places, but by an ordinary man who had everything to lose, and still chose to act. After searching, he finally found him working long hours at a modest job, his daughter sitting at a nearby table with crayons and paper, patiently waiting for her father to finish. The CEO approached, not in his usual sharp suit but humbly, almost nervously. The father looked up, surprised, and stood as though ready to apologize for the other night's trouble. But the CEO shook his head. "I didn't come to thank you," he said softly. "I came to offer you a chance." He explained that his company had an opening, one with stability, fair pay, and benefits that could change the little girl's future. The father hesitated, his pride telling him not to accept charity, but the CEO continued, "This isn't a gift. It's recognition. You showed me what true leadership looks like, protecting others, even when it's hard. That's the kind of person I need on my team." Tears welled in the dad's eyes as he finally nodded, his daughter beaming beside him. In that moment, both men realized something: courage given in silence can echo louder than power ever will.